Hey guys, Miss Miners here for day 27. This week we are reading biographies, which if you remember from yesterday, I explained a biography is a story written by someone that is about a real person and it is about that real person's life. But I also explained that it is not an autobiography, so it's not these people writing about their own life. It is a writer writing about someone else's life. And if you remember, our question is, why would someone want to write about someone else's life? Why do you think that's important? Why do you think it's important that someone writes a story about someone else's life? So yesterday we learned about Zora Hurston, and Zora Hurston is famous for writing. And we learned about kind of her relationship with her mother and how that kind of formed and caused her to want to become a writer. So today we are going to read a different story. It is also about a woman in history, and today we're going to be reading about a woman named Celia Cruz. And Celia Cruz is known for dancing, and she is actually known as the Queen of Salsa, which if you don't know what salsa is, you're going to know in a couple minutes. But again, before I get started, I just want to make sure and say this is again coming from our Fountas Pinnell Interactive Read Aloud text sets. So all copyright information and credit goes to Fountas Pinnell. So like I said, today's story is going to teach us about Celia Cruz, who was known as the Queen of Salsa. So our author is Veronica Chambers, and our illustrator is Julie Marin. So here's our front cover, and here's our back cover. Okay, so let's look at the front cover again. What do you notice on the front cover? Obviously, you can kind of assume that that girl is who we will be reading about. So that girl is Celia Cruz, and I want you to take a look at this. And I want you to remember this because this is going to become very important in the story. Okay, so obviously we know that's a bird, and there's a bird, and then we've got Celia Cruz, who is known as the Queen of Salsa, which you will learn is a type of dance. Okay, so Celia Cruz is singing actually a type of music or a type of dance music called salsa. So that is what she is known for. Okay, and we're going to take a look before we start reading at something called the end papers. And that is this part right here, not part of the story, but it's kind of on the inside flap. So I want you to take a look at that. Okay, you see different photographs and they have dates on them. And then we're going to turn to the back. And again, you see the back cover and it is on the inside back cover. And I want you to take a look at that. Okay, and so before we read, I want you to kind of ask yourself, what do you think the years on those photographs might tell you? We'll look at them one more time before we start reading. Look at the years, look at the dates. Now remember, they're photographs. What do you think those dates might be telling you? Why do you think they put those dates on there? Okay. All right, so today's story, Celia Cruz, Queen of Salsa. So let's learn about Celia Cruz. In the fabled land of Havana, where rhythm grows sweet and juicy like oranges in Florida, there lived a girl. She looked like a girl and talked like a girl, but everyone who ever met her agreed she sang like a bird. When Celia Cruz was a girl growing up in Cuba, she could never hear the magic others claimed was in her voice. When she opened up her mouth to sing, she heard a girl like any other. But when she sang, her father heard thunder. Her cousins heard the call of the sea. Her neighbors heard a hummingbird. Celia would grow up to be a queen, But she was not born a princess. She grew up in a poor section of town, one of 4 sisters, though the house was also home to numerous cousins. At times, there were as many as 14 children in the 2-bedroom house. Still, young Celia always stood out amongst the crowd. Her mother liked to tell the story of how a tourist bought Celia's first pair of shoes after hearing the little girl sing. Okay, so again, we have a little post-it note, so pay attention for your question here. What are some things that you've already learned about Celia Cruz so far in our story? I can think of a bunch that I just told you on that page. Think about where she lives, who she lives with, what happened when she was a young girl. All of those things you can include in that answer. Like other girls in Havana, she had chores. Some of her friends were charged with sweeping the kitchen. Other girls washed the dinner plates. Celia's job was to sing lullabies to put her younger brothers and sisters to sleep. At night, her voice carried through the windows, rolling along the cobblestone streets like a wheel or a wish. The people in her neighborhood began to gather outside of her family's front door, begging her father to leave it open. They said, "Her voice is tan dulce, sweet like azucar." Her voice, it was said, sent you not only to sleep, but to a nighttime land of angel dreams. So her friends have chores like we would think are normal chores, sweeping the kitchen or washing the dinner plates, but her chore was just to sing a lullaby to her brothers and sisters to get them to go to sleep. Always shy and more than a little independent, Celia mistook the gathering crowds for busybodies, watching her every move. "Ay, por favor," she pleaded. "If you don't leave, these little ones will never get to sleep." Despite her initial shyness, she could not stop singing. In the afternoon, after school, she would listen to the rapid-fire calls and cries of the pregón, the street vendors calling out their wares. In time, people would recognize the passion and pulsating cries of the pregón in Celia's unique vocal style. Okay, so we have another question on this page. It says, look at the people. What happens when Celia sings? Let's look at those people and look at their faces. What happens when she sings? And then there's also another question on here, and it says, what are busybodies? What do you think busybodies might be? In high school, she began singing in school shows and local clubs. The music that she loved, el son and la guaracha, blended traditional Afro-Cuban rhythms with the flavor and folklore of the tropics. It was the kind of music that sizzled from the joy of being alive. Her father loved to watch his little songbird, watch her send 100 hearts soaring with her melodies. But he was also cautious. "Keep studying, mija," he told her as she hummed old Cuban love songs, while absent-mindedly flipping the pages of her school books. "You are so smart. Forget about singing. Become a school teacher and make our family proud." So on this page it says, notice how Celia's father looks at her while she's singing. How do you think he feels about Celia singing? So let's look again at her father down here. And looking at his face, how do you think he feels about her singing? Okay, so that's the first part. And then the second part says, it says that Celia's father is cautious. Let's think about that word cautious. What do you think that means, to be cautious about something? And then the last question on this page says, what could be risky about being a singer? So I want you to think about the word cautious and risky. So the word cautious kind of goes along with risky. Okay? So if her father is cautious, he's cautious because being a singer might be a risky job. So think about it that way. Why do you think he would be cautious? And why do you think being a singer might be risky? Her teachers, however, saw things a different way. Take a chance, one professor told her. With your voice, you could earn in one day what it takes me to earn a year. But it is not easy to take a dream planted in your heart and make it grow in the world. Celia was unknown and did not have the kind of connections that easily opened doors. Still, she jumped at every opportunity. Talent contests at the National Theater and amateur nights on the radio. She never forgot her father's lessons on the importance of education. And after graduating high school, she enrolled in Cuba's National Music Conservatory, where she studied piano, voice, and musical theory. Then, in 1950, she got her big shot. The most popular band of the day was a group called La Sonora Matancera, and they were auditioning for a new lead singer. When they heard Celia sing the way she made each and every note swing, they decided to give the little songbird a job. At first, La Sonora's public was outraged. Who was this no-name singer fronting their favorite band? The phones at the Havana radio stations rang off the hook with complaints. At home, Celia began to wonder if she shouldn't take her father's advice and just teach school. Was she really the ruin of Cuba's most beloved band? She stood by the window, looking out at the stars she feared she would never join. And Celia asked herself, why do I sing? Is it for fame and fortune and for fans that do not exist? No, she told herself. I sing for my parents, the ancestors, and the saints. I sing because when I lift my voice up high, I feel like the first pájaro of the day, whistling buenos dias to anyone who will listen. I sing for my little brothers and sisters and the sweet expressions on their faces when they finally fall asleep. Although Celia was seriously thinking about giving up her dream, her bandmates refused to allow her to quit. As a group, they rewrote the history of Cuban music with new arrangements and a fresh, innovative style. By the time she left Cuba in 1960, Celia was as beloved throughout the country as the men who made music with her. She'd even earned an affectionate nickname from her thousands of fans. They called the group Café con Leche, coffee with milk, because Celia's skin was very dark and her bandmates was very fair. In the United States, she became a citizen and her talent was rewarded with a permanent contract at the Hollywood Palladium. But once she left Cuba, politics dictated that she could never return. She would never again walk the streets of her beloved Havana. She would never again hear the cries of the pregón that were the bass and treble of Cuban street life. It was a heartache she carried her whole life through. So at this time, it was a really sad and difficult time in Cuba because there was a new leader who took over the Cuban government, and many people left the country, including Celia. So I want you to stop for a minute and I want you to think about, how would you feel if you had to leave the country that you were born in and go to a different country and you could never go back to the country that you were born in? How would you feel? Think about how Celia is feeling right now. Still, she kept her heart open. Lost loves made room for new loves, and it was there, in Hollywood, that factory town of movies and dreams, that the young princess of salsa music fell in love with a knight in shining armor. His name was really Knight, Pedro Knight. He was the lead trumpet player of the Palladium Orchestra, and while he dazzled her with his high notes, he won her love with his understanding. She told him that her heart would always be split in 3 pieces, and only one part would belong to him. One part of her heart belonged to the music, and the third piece would always live in Cuba. Celia knew that she had met more than her husband. She had met an angel who would be her companion and protector in this land so far from home. Celia Cruz brought salsa music to every corner of the earth, from London to the Congo, from Brazil to Japan. She recorded over 20 gold albums and is known the world over as the Queen of Salsa. For more than 40 years, Pedro Knight was her king. Celia's performance trademark was a full-throated shout of azúcar. It's the Spanish word for sugar, and the only word, many say, that so perfectly described her voice. In the fabled land of Havana, where rhythm grows, sweet and juicy like oranges in Florida, there lived a girl. She looked like a girl and talked like a girl, but everyone who ever met her agreed she sang like a bird. The bird girl grew into a princess, and the princess became a much beloved queen. Her kingdom was music, and those who loved her called her not by her name, but by the joy she inspired. At concerts, they called out, "Azúcar!" and Celia Cruz never failed them. She sung like sugar, sweet sugar, wherever she went. So on this page, we have a Post-it note, and it says, the author says, she sung like sugar wherever she went. How do you think it sounded when Celia sang? They said she sung like sugar. How do you think that might sound? Try to describe that for me. The end. So, like I said, she was known, and I actually at the beginning said that she was known for dance, because salsa is a type of dance, but in this one, she is actually known for singing. Okay, so Celia Cruz is a famous Cuban, which means she's from Cuba, and she was famous for her singing. So, as you answer the questions for this story, if you haven't already, be thinking about why the writer wanted to tell us about the life of Celia Cruz. And last week we read about some hardships and challenges and how to be determined and overcome those. And I think this book goes along with that question as well, because Celia had some challenges. She didn't grow up rich and she didn't have everything that she wanted when she grew up, but she still grew up to become a famous singer. So she also had to overcome some challenges when she was a young girl. And the writer wanted to make sure that we knew about that she didn't grow up famous. She had to work for it. So as I read all these stories, make sure you're thinking about not just what the people are now, but what they were like as they were growing up. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for day 28.